welcome to the RDS in Dublin. My name is Dermot Breen and I'm a member of the RDS Committee of Enterprise, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's discussion on how consumer behaviour is changing and the impact it is having and going to have on Irish businesses in the future. We're delighted to be able to host this webinar from the RDS as part of our Vision 2030 series of talks. This aims to harness the insight and expertise of thought leaders, influencers and innovators to identify the challenges and opportunities facing Ireland over the next decade. The focus is firmly on the future and what Ireland can do to ensure economic, environmental and socially sustainable development. And we're delighted today to welcome Conor Pope, Consumer Affairs Correspondent at the Irish Times, who will host today's discussion. Conor is a prolific journalist and well established as a leading journalist in the Irish Times, and as well as that as being Consumer Affairs Correspondent, he is actually now Ireland's leading consumer advocate. And in that role, he holds many businesses to task for their deeds and indeed their misdeeds. So we look forward to Conor's leading today. Conor is joined by an expert panel who'll share their insights into the changes that have taken place and their thoughts on the future. And our panel includes Colin Gordon, who is founder of Engage Consulting and a former chief executive of Glanbia Consumer Products. Colin is one of Ireland's leading and most respected marketers with decades of experience in Irish business. In his most recent book, Marketing is in Trouble, Colin explores the world of marketing and how it's lost its way, and I'm glad to say debunks much of the myth and mythology around marketing. It's essential reading for anyone with an interest in marketing and has been internationally recognised as one of the best books in marketing in the last few years. McCarthy is the founder and managing director of MCCP, which is an independent strategy consultancy working with leading national and international brands to achieve transformative and sustainable growth. Kay's experience spans both client and agency side, and she's led many high-profile consumer campaigns for brands such as Fáilte Ireland, Coca-Cola, Nestlé and Xbox. Lucinda Kelly is the founder and chief executive of Popertee, which is focused on connecting retail spaces with marketers, brands and consumers. Since founding Popertee in 2016, Lucinda has worked with many leading brands including Facebook, Coca-Cola and Dyson, using data analytics to identify prime locations for pop-up shops and marketing campaigns. Please feel free to join the conversation today from your laptop at home by emailing your questions to enterprise@rds.ie. We'll take your questions as they come through towards the end of the discussion. And we'll put as many of those questions as we can after that discussion. So without further delay, I'll hand over to Conor to lead today's discussion.
Thanks very much, Dermot. And I could just say welcome to everybody. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be out of my house, frankly, and off my couch. It's the first time in a long time that's happened. Because like most people in the country, I suspect I'm working from home and have been since March. I haven't been in the Irish Times building since the 8th or 9th of March, which if you'd said that to me a year ago, it would have been just unimaginable. This is my second hosting event in the online space in the last week. This is quite different to the first one because last Saturday I was the MC of the Irish Times Children's Christmas Party, in which I had to introduce Santa to all the kids. So that was a big, big challenge. And I suspect the challenge today won't be as great because there's literally nobody in the world more important than Santa Claus. But I suppose I'd start off by saying that our world has changed in so many ways over the last 10 or 11 months. And it's changed in ways that would have been unimaginable at this time last year. I mean, from, you know, we have lost the ability to grieve properly. We can't shop properly. We can't shake hands. We can't hug. We can't meet our families. We can't interact. We can't travel. I mean, our world has become so incredibly small and fearful because this kind of, I know that people knew that a pandemic was always a possibility, but it was always something that was in the background. It was never going to happen in our lifetime, but it has. And the manner in which our consumer world has changed has just been profound. But I suppose rather than focusing on where we were and what we've all lived through, I think the purpose of this is more to talk about where we're going and how our world is going to be reshaped by our experience in 2020. And that's maybe where we could start off, because like, I suppose if you guys, I mean, you're the experts in your fields, so you know, the truth about journalism, it's all smoke and mirrors, you know. We all pretend to be experts, but you guys are the real experts. You're at the coalface every single day. So maybe, like, what are the big ways in which the world of consumerism has changed over the last 10 or 11 months? I'll put that to you first, Kay, maybe.
Thanks, Conor. And I suppose it's hard to think what's going to happen going forward without talking about
Exactly.
the last 12 months or where we came from. And obviously what we saw in the last 9 months is an acceleration of trends that were on the cusp anyway. So if you look at online, people were moving towards online. And really what's happened is that that's accelerated, and maybe somebody in their 60s is now online, or 70s, who wasn't 12 months ago. So that's one trend, and that's obviously going to stay because people have found it very useful, very convenient. Another big one is that people, sustainability was very important, and it was kind of a belief and a value set, particularly for younger cohorts, maybe that 18 to 24-year-old or that Generation Z that we might call them. So that's also ramped up because people are more conscious. They've had more time to reflect. The home as a hub has been a concept. So we've been at home trapped, thinking about what we're going to cook. A lot of those short-term behaviours like cooking, banana bread won't stay, right? But I think online will stay, for example. And people are a lot more conscious of what they're eating and drinking and the sustainability around it. But a lot of people are just dying. We talk to consumers every day, practically. I was sitting through groups last night, and people are just dying to get back to normality at this point. So yes, people want to get back into shops. Yes, people want to get back into pubs, back into social means again. So I think there's a lot of pent-up demand for those. So some of the same will come back again for sure.
And is that interaction that we all crave with other human beings, will the online concept replace that to a degree? I mean, will people be interacting less if they're shopping online, do you reckon, Colin?
Well, one of the themes that I try and unpick, I guess, in the book I've recently published is the issue of coping. All of marketing, all of consumer spending, all of consumer behaviour is in some way shaped by how they are coping with the environment around them. Up to now, it's been coping with personal finances, the number of hours in the day, managing childcare, getting back and forth. How do I fit my holidays in? It's been relatively, if you want to call it, neutral coping. Obviously, the pandemic has changed everything, but people are still just trying to cope, and the pandemic has forced people to cope in a way that they never would have managed before. Online is an obvious way. Another way is people are much more focused on what I would call mission shopping. So they're going to get something rather than just to spend a day at leisure, which they might have been doing in the past. And if they bought something that was part of the experience, but it wasn't necessarily the ultimate destination or purpose of it, it was to be out. People are now much more mission oriented, and they're much less. In my sense, they are focused on the experience of the actual purchase, whether that be online or not, and they're very unforgiving if they're disappointed with that. So I bought something online yesterday. Within an hour, I got a personal note from the company in Longford, which I didn't even know existed in Longford. I knew they were Irish, which I was keen to do. But dear Colin, thank you very much indeed for supporting us. We really appreciate all our customers. If we can be of any help, it doesn't take much to do it, but it certainly expanded my experience. And people, therefore, I think are looking for more while they're trying to cope with a very, very, very different world than they would have been experiencing up to now.
And we might talk about the shift to local in a minute, because that's obviously been a big thing over the last, since the start of the pandemic in March. But I wonder, Lucinda, like if shopping is no longer a leisure pursuit, and if you talk to an awful lot of people who work in that space, they would say that it is the most popular leisure pursuit in Ireland. People love to go shopping. Will that, if it becomes something else, if it becomes this, as Colin said, mission-orientated experience, does that drain a little bit from our lives? And do you think will we feel that in the next year or two, if we're not shopping for fun? Or do you think actually the experience of shopping with a purpose and a singular purpose might be good for us?
So I think shopping will always continue. I think what we've recognised over COVID is that more people are shopping or purchasing online. And what we have when we do that is a very unemotional experience. And it's important for brands and retailers to create the emotional experience in that offline world. So what I know it's happened to me and friends and everybody is we're dying to get out, and we're social animals and we will get out. So shopping offline or online will continue. But it's about what is the place of that physical asset or the bricks and mortar in that mix. And for what I believe is that place is about creating that experience. So you have intent to go into city centre, but you want to go in and remember something and have something that's emotional, and you can build a relationship with the brand, because you're going to do your online shopping. The online retailer is going to try and get you to go from A to B as quickly as possible. And I will want to get out of the house, but the reason I want to get out of the house is to have something that's going to be memorable and an experience.
It's funny you should say that, because for years I've been writing in the Irish Times about the death of retail. And not cheerleading that by any means, like mourning the fact that an awful lot of the local retailers that all of us might have grown up with are going by the wayside, because they simply can't face the competition that's presented with the big multinationals, the online players, Amazon, eBay, ASOS, whatever it might be. And the only silver bullet the retailer had up until March the 1st, 2020, was the experiential thing. That what a bricks and mortar, what a physical shop could do that an online retailer couldn't do, it could create that tactile experience. And that could be anything from Dunnes Stores putting in coffee bars in their shops, or Penny's offering manicures and eyebrow threading. Is that the word? Threading. There you go. In their shops. So they were giving people another reason to walk through the doors. It wasn't just about the acquisition of stuff or the buying of things. It was about having an experience. But surely today, the last thing anybody wants is that physical interaction and that face-to-face encounter with somebody, even if they actually do want it. But given the world in which we live in and the fact that COVID has impacted us all so terribly, what's the silver bullet now for retail? How can retail survive if that tactile experiential thing is just taken away?
Yeah. So I think there's huge opportunity for retail. You can't assume everybody's going to go back to bricks and mortar. So retail really has to design and start thinking about customer needs and really lean into them. And what consumers are telling us is, look, I really miss those experiences. And we can see that. Everybody's out at Christmas at the moment. They're not always out buying. They're out to get the buzz. So people are coming back, but they're coming back. We need to realise that they have been online, so their expectations will have changed. So when it comes to convenience, they really expect things to be fast and easy. But in the bricks and mortar, they want that experience, so they want the environment to be safe. They want the queues to be well managed. And as we go through 2021, we know we'll be in and out of restrictions, most likely at least for the first half. But they do want those experiences, and whether that's a pop-up experience, and I'm sure Lucinda has some great examples in store, or they want, they want certainly service to be excellent. They don't want anyone not to know the product and be able to help them. And I think for Irish stores, there's a huge advantage, having staff who are friendly and to the point, fast, immediate, and delivering on the points, so that customer experience, knowing the product, even in changing rooms, having them designed so they can get in and out quite easily, and maybe they can order them. Cashless and payment systems will be rapidly revolutionised. Safe payment to go. Why not from the curation of where you're trying them on? They'll want to see new, especially for higher products. Where it's luxury, you're selling joy. You're not selling tangible products. Yes, you can get it on Amazon, or yes, you can buy it online from that same store. You want to go into the store and talk about how it's built, how it's made, feel good about, justifying that purchase. So I think the joy of the experience, which we all love for brands, is what people need to feel in stores. So I think there's huge opportunities there to bring that to life. And I think certainly for Irish stores, smaller stores where craft is important, they want masterclasses, they want new things to do. And the store is a critical part of that delivery.
And how does a retailer bring joy to the experience today?
I'll answer that just in one moment. There is a kind of a background to all of this, and it may be looking at it from a different view. There are too many shops. There is going to be an evolution. It was probably going to happen anyway. There's too many pubs. In Ireland, we are very, very good at having an awful lot of everything. There's 22,000 solicitors. There's 12,000 estate agents.
They'd all tell you they're essential to
and I'm sure, and they are certainly to themselves and to their families and to their immediates. They are absolutely. But we are very good at having an awful lot of everything. So an example would be I worked in the consumer goods business in the grocery area mostly for most of my life, a working life. Every time I went to a trade conference, there was talk of, we're going to open 400 stores. Everyone would say it. But there isn't enough room for all of them to have opened them. And now we're seeing some of that beginning to manifest, the results of that beginning to manifest, which is you can't survive equally by just spreading the thing so thin. I think the same would apply to a lot of other goods areas, whether it be beauty or whether it be boutique or whether it be cars or whether... I think there's an awful lot of everything. So there is going to be a natural fallout, and that might be tragic, and it is obviously for the people involved, but it is logical and it is to be expected. It's just happening much quicker than it might have happened otherwise. Same would happen with the pub business, I guess.
And what happens to that space? Let's say if you take
that's the big question.
If you have a big street, Grafton Street,
yeah,
and let's say 20% of those businesses go.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't there a tipping point in retail? And you might know this, Lucinda, where if a certain percentage of the units are empty, suddenly consumers look at that space and go, "Oh, I don't really fancy going in there. It's dead or it's dying." Like, is there a danger we could get to a tipping point like that? And would that present an opportunity for a business like yours to create more pop-ups?
Yeah, so that's all happened before COVID.
Yeah.
Like, why do people want to go down Grafton Street and see the same stores? There's nothing different because I'm going to go down that street and I'm going to go down the same one in London, same in Milan. So that happened the last couple of years. And it's about going back to creating interesting experiences, putting brands in that might be on a pop-up or short-term basis that I have to go in and see it quickly, bringing a mix of local brands in because you want to touch and feel their product, and actually getting out of the standard mindset that a lot of the traditional landlords have and going, it's okay to put them in for a low cost or on a short-term contract or for free. We'll give you a turnover base, we'll do something different. I think sometimes our mindset is still quite stuck in how it should be done, and we need to do our 10-year lease. And I think if we can take that step back and look at it, and what we do in Popertee is we look at it as a marketing asset. It's just like a digital billboard, and you need data to track how it's evolving and what's happening. And I think for me anyway, that is the future of what we need in the physical retail and the place in the marketing mix.
And do you think landlords, as a subset, realise that? Do you think people in that industry recognise the fact that the world has changed profoundly, and it's not going to be the same next year?
I think generally, to generalise it, the landlords feel it when they feel the pain. So when we had the depression or the recession before, pop-ups were popular, and they were like, let's do pop-ups. And they're popular again now because of this, but let's not just look at it as a short-term fix until things get better. This is something to stay. So I think we just need to get into their minds that there's value in this, and the value isn't just in what the value of that asset is, it's in the bigger value of that street and why we're bringing people out and about into the physical world.
But also, Conor, we need to reimagine what the high street should be. We think it should be exactly as we're talking, that what Lucinda's saying about whether it's the same profile as London or New York or Milan or wherever. Why can't there be residents? Why can't there be experiences? Why can't there be entertainment facilities on the same real estate? It doesn't have to be each well-known international brand of clothing, one after the other, all the way down Grafton Street or whatever other street it might be. There is an asset there. It is real estate. So a lot of town centres in the centre of Ireland were residences as well as shops down below. That's largely gone. If you drive down, for instance, I'm always struck, if you drive down Leeson Street and look up one story, it's derelict above the shopping area. There's no reason for that to be the case. Landlords or the real estate owners need to reimagine what that property is meant to be doing for them. And it doesn't have to be the big international boutique or fashion company, one after the other.
Yeah,
I think that's the thing, because we're quite fixed in, this is a house where I live and this is a shop where I go and shop. But again, taking that step back to Colin's point, it's about reimagining retail, and it's about, we've got lots of vacant spaces, whether it's industrial or whether it's retail, and it's about reusing them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a channel, this is for shopping or similar. Like, what's the one, I think in the States it was one of the major retailers, Sears or one of those, and they have all these vacant, large, the size of like the Debenhams or the House of Frasers, and the likes of, I think in Amazon, are going in and using them as distribution hubs. Or it could be somebody like Deliveroo looking at dark kitchens. So it's actually trying to take that step back.
Yeah.
And
there's an opportunity, though, in reimagining the city to look at what people want. And as part of that, people are the heart of everything. That's the wallet is in them. And I think the city centre needs to be thriving, not dead. So it's, what can make it socially thriving? So the social conscious, and we were talking earlier about that Generation Y, those younger consumers who are really, they don't want to own lots of stuff. They want to experience it. So it's back to experiences. And I think there was some good examples, pop-ups as well, obviously. During COVID, actually, if you looked at Cork, some of the streetscapes there, beautiful outdoor dining and entertainment. Yet City Council restrictions is very restrictive for Dublin City pubs, etc. So, in making cities the pulse of a place that has theatre, culture, art, and social vibrancy coexisting with retail and living, of course, that is what cities are about. Not dangerous, dark places where they're too expensive to park, hard to get a space, and you just want to get in and out. So I think
absolutely, well, the living, breathing city that you've described there, like that's Madrid, that's Barcelona, that's Berlin. That's how those cities were built over generations. Like, can we realistically get to that point in Ireland? I mean, we'd all, as you say, you make a really good point, Colin. We say Leeson Street, like gorgeous potential apartments, high-ceilinged, sash windows, all lying empty because either the rent is too dear for businesses, and it's certainly they're not equipped or adequate for families. But similarly, the town centres aren't adequate for families. I mean, in Dublin city centre, for instance, and I know this well, there's one playground, really. There's the Stephen's Green playground, and that's it. So the idea that you'd have suddenly hundreds, if not thousands, of families living around Dublin city centre when there's nothing for them to do. And the other difficulty that's impossible to get around is the fact that you mentioned outdoor dining in Cork. And outdoor dining is a lovely idea, but not in the middle of December when it's lashing rain and it's freezing cold. Because ultimately we live in Ireland.
Yeah, but in November they did a pretty good job, just on level 3 at the cusp. I was in and there was beautiful heating systems, and the pub, the atmosphere felt great outside. So I think in reimagining we have to be a lot more innovative about what's possible.
And who does that? Who does the reimagining? Is it all of us? Should we have a future czar? Somebody who would be charged with making our world better?
Well, we've preoccupied ourselves in Ireland for the last, 20 years in trying to fix the economy. We've never really stood back and tried to fix, society and what sort of country we want to live in. But there's a very good example. There's a quote I heard the other day, which is from virologists or epidemiologists, who said, if you live through one pandemic, you've lived through one pandemic. They don't come very often. The last big one that hit France before the First World War and the Spanish flu was the cholera epidemic, which reimagined Paris. So Haussmann was given charge by, I think it's Napoleon, to just reorganise Paris. And all of the streets and boulevards and all of the green spaces that were developed in Paris are only about 150 or so years old, because they were designed to cope with a future pandemic, which is give me green spaces, move the houses apart, don't have everyone on top of each other. So we should be using this opportunity to reimagine what our cities, how we dine, how we entertain, how we socialise. We have a really good opportunity to do it. It does mean that it's joined up thinking. So whether it's a future czar or a social czar or something, I don't know, but we do need joined up thinking. So the local authorities have to be thinking the same way as the shopkeepers, as the real estate owners, as the shoppers, to get everything into one direction.
So there's an opportunity there to make, as the phrase goes, never waste a good crisis. There's an opportunity to make our world better. Do you think we'll take that opportunity, Lucinda? Like, I know you can't know for sure because you don't have a crystal ball.
No, I do, and I think I've always heard that, and just the way you explain it, that innovation really grows after a crisis. And I think to your earlier question, I think there's some amazing startups out there, and they're the ones that really drive innovation, and we need to try and support them as best as possible. And then from the top up with government, and there are smart cities projects. The only thing with some of them is they can be limited with innovation because they're part of a bigger structure, and that always sort of stifles innovation. So I think it's a combination of ground up. Let's try and support those startups with what they're doing. And when I say startups, let the smaller businesses try and help us evolve the retail, and then the Smart Cities project, and include where we're going with retail as well, or with the physical world. It's
funny you should say it, because you talk about the reimagining of the city. And this morning, I live in Dublin 7, so I was travelling across the city. And I initially decided to drive, and that wasn't a success because traffic was mental. So I left the car. I didn't abandon it, but I left the car, and I got one of the city bikes, which are relatively new in Dublin. And I cycled from Smithfield to the RDS. And what struck me was that there's a cycle lane that has been built post-pandemic, all the way along the quays, and they have this little concrete barrier along some of it to stop the cars encroaching, and they have these bushes and trees to stop the cars encroaching on another stretch. Now that cycle lane was 10 or 15 years in the planning. And they couldn't get it right. They just couldn't do it. Dublin City Council were incapable. They'd drawn up multiple plans. There was objections. At one point, they had the bus corridor going through a building. Lots of things went wrong. But then suddenly, there was an imperative. There was a need for this because they had to create wider footpaths, and they knew people wouldn't be using public transport. And within 3 weeks, they had these cycle lanes ready to go. And is that something that we could learn from? And maybe it just requires the courage on the part of authorities to say, you know what, the appetite amongst the public is there, let's just do it.
I think it requires mindset change and integration, joined up thinking. But I think I'm a strong believer that it's probably entrepreneurs, individuals who need a lot more input and economic support to do that, because the existing structures are so hardwired into old way of thinking. So I think certainly revolutions come out of these pandemics, but they come from people having big ideas, championing them and getting government support from the top and it being integrated. I think if it's left to authorities, it's going to take some time because of their structure, not because of any individual. So I think the structure needs to enable the change and the support at government level. And I think it needs to be driven, from the top down, not kind of left of centre or right.
Well, you say that, but the Paris example that Colin gave, that presumably came from the state. It was the state deciding our cities aren't fit for purpose.
They appointed Houseman, who was an architect.
Yeah.
He had a brilliant concept. He was maverick in his day, and he implemented it. And they facilitated that. So who's our Houseman?
Yeah.
Is it not
who's
like
our Napoleon?
Even with the vaccines coming out, FDA processes should be years long. Yet look at how quickly we've got it. So if you look at that analogy and bring it to this, somebody can turn it on quicker. Somebody should be able to.
And that's the
with
thing.
this.
But wouldn't it be terrible to waste the crisis?
Yeah.
And that brings me to the next question. How sustainable and how enduring are the changes that we've seen going to be? Will the mindset of consumers change? Will that mission shopping thing exist? Will the desire to shop local continue? Or this time next year, could we be sitting here and everything is exactly as it was in 2019?
The two examples that are out there at the moment, and by the way, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so we don't know how it's all going to be to fix itself, and we really have to wait, I guess, for 5 years to look back. But as we are currently standing, Australia and China are the two examples that have been thrown up. Australia, having more or less come out of all of its restrictions, they are surprised themselves with how quickly they returned to normal. Is kind of the headline. And the other headline is that once the Chinese system was able to control, in whatever way the Chinese system does control its pandemic impact, it went back to the normal growth rates that were existing. So online had been booming. Online is a very strong growth engine in the Chinese system. It went into exponential growth during the lockdowns there. It has resorted back to the normal growth rates very quickly after they released the economy back to normality. So you get a sense that things may well not stay on the current trend lines, but the general themes may well persist. So the theme towards online, the theme towards more flexible working, the theme towards a kind of a fluid approach to life, to socialising, will probably persist, but maybe not at the rate that has existed or has come through in the last 9 months.
But as you said, I think all of you have said that a lot of these things were happening anyway. There was that move towards the online shopping experience. There was that move towards the closure of retail spaces in town centres and the Walmartisation of society, whereby all the big retail is pushed out onto the fringes and towns are left to die. So does that mean if those things were happening anyway and we're going to revert to the pace at which they were happening pre-COVID, does that mean nothing will have changed?
I think you said towns are left to die. I think one shift...
Not here now, but in the States it's happened. It hasn't happened here yet, but it's...
But it was happening, in fairness.
Yeah.
It was, because it was all about... But the one shift that's happened that I think is for the better is about the growth again in neighbourhood towns.
Yeah.
And I live in Stillorgan, and I never knew some of the stuff I had in Stillorgan or Blackrock. And I like it, and I like walking the dogs there now, and I like the coffee shop. And I think that is here to stay. I think the neighbourhood towns and the demand we're getting in Popertee is from brands looking at more of the suburban areas outside of city centre. So I think that's not just for the pandemic. I think that's here to stay.
Yeah, and that's been a really interesting phenomena of the pandemic. There was the local experience. Like everybody I meet, everybody I talk to, they talk about how they now value their local butchers, their greengrocers, their bakers. Like, is that something, do you think, Kay, that'll endure?
I think it will, because hybridisation will endure. So people will want to work at home 2 or 3 days a week, especially if you're travelling in from maybe Dalkey or South Dublin or Cork or Carlow or Kilkenny or Naas. Why would you want to waste an hour on a train rushed up against somebody? So I think if we say that hybridisation is likely to stay, one of these most likely things, then in that those local stores should still thrive, and the home as hub will thrive. You know, people have invested lots of money in their barbecues and their gardens, so they're certainly not going to ditch that and change motion. You know, of course, they're dying to get back to that holiday overseas. I think after their health, the holiday is the #1 thing on their destination. But when they go out, I think they won't put up anymore with, you know, food that's not quality, and we've seen loads of great quality in Irish food recently. It's brilliant at the moment. They won't put up with bad service, you know, so their expectations will have changed. They will want stuff fast if they order it online, and they will want the staff to know them and that personalised service. So I think certain things will get better and will need to get better for them to survive. And it's back to some of the basics, I suppose, that we've always known. Good customer service. What is that in the new era? People will want it quick, they want it sharp, and they'll want that experience. And I do think that when people will go out for a day of their time in the future, they'll want to get a lot of experience for that day. Whereas before we used to rush around, remember, we couldn't have the time to pick up your dry cleaning. You rushed everywhere. I think now people have reflected and understood the value of each of these experiences and where to put their time, so they'll be coming back with that lens. But of course they're going to go back and they're going to spend because they're dying. There's lots of pent-up demand. So I think there's going to be a big soar in certain products and certain experiences. And I think it's a question of how the ones that are going to fall out will deal with it, and basically how the experiences in store will deliver to those new needs.
And do you think customer service either has improved since the start of the crisis?
I certainly think people are more conscious of it. The shoppers are more conscious of it, and they're more conscious of it being evidenced locally, because they're able to actually interface and engage directly with the person providing that service, whether it be the butcher or the small boutique or the petrol station. The recognition piece, and maybe that's an Irish thing, I'm not quite sure, but certainly the idea of being recognised or being thanked, or being in some way conversed with, is invaluable, because my wife works as a therapist. One of the things that she's noticed in her very increased workload over the last number of months is how lonely people are. And there is no better way of and obviously some people can't get out because they are cocooning and so on, but there's no better way of breaking loneliness than actually talking to someone. So whether it's on the walks that you know people are actually engaging now on walks, they're engaging in queues, obviously socially distanced, but they're chatting, they're talking. They don't have an awful lot to talk about because we're all so restricted in what we actually are doing. But there is that sense of people wanting to network, wanting to socialise. So I think that's a valuable thing, and that's best done locally, to be quite honest.
And what do you think, Lucinda?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's become organic that customer service is better. It's not a strategic initiative from a business going, let's be kinder. People are kinder now because of this pandemic. I'm just finding it when I'm dealing with people are sort of a little bit more natural, not as sharp, whether you're in the physical retail or whether it's the Zoom call or whatever. So I just think people are a bit nicer. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think an awful lot of people are. And then there's obviously a cohort who are probably a lot nastier. But
is there?
Yeah, I would
agree.
There are people who it brings out the worst in some people.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't like to... there's a certain cohort I'm thinking of, but I'll keep that thought to myself.
Have a list.
What?
You have a list.
But I think one of the reasons why is that... why people have become nicer, as you say, Lucinda, is that we all crave human contact and human interaction. And we've all been starved of it. And I was writing a piece for the Irish Times last week or 2 weeks ago, and I wrote probably the saddest sentence that I've ever written in my life, which is that the place I've spent more time apart from my home this year, the most time apart from my home this year, was Lidl. Like,
Yeah.
and no disrespect to Lidl. I'm quite fond of the German discounters. But when you think that, because there was nowhere else to go.
No, Lidl was out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to walk up. I became obsessed even more than I was with the middle aisle, because I could actually buy something that wasn't food.
Yeah.
And I think and I think an awful lot of people had that experience. And I think maybe that has. And then there was the whole be kind thing. And I think we all started to really value, in a way that maybe we didn't in the past, the retail workers on the front lines. Because they were the ones in March and April that were taking the risks to keep us fed. And I'll never forget the first day when Leo Varadkar announced that the schools were closing and there was a partial lockdown happening. I went to Tesco in Dublin 7, Cabra, and I went to the Lidl near where I live. And the panic on people's faces, I'll never forget it. And we all know that the shelves are stripped of toilet paper and flour and yeast, something that I'd say had never been bought by anybody. And suddenly you couldn't get it. And it was genuine fear. But I think that fear has kind of slowly been replaced by a recognition that, we're not going to run out of this stuff.
No.
The supply chains are solid.
Yep.
But we still need to be nice to the people who are serving us the food, because they were the ones who kept us going during the really tough times.
But I think people will be impatient to those who aren't being good, who aren't giving a good experience. I think people will, in a kind of way, I was half joking about, do you have a list? I think people have a mental record of where things have been good and bad. And people will, I think, respond accordingly. There is a sense that people are enjoying and very much engaged with where it's positive. And they'll be very, very impatient in the future. With those who haven't been, for whatever reason, overpriced, bad service, sloppy, nasty. People will, I think, be quite impatient with that going forward. So I think the impact of the pandemic generally could have many different ripples. So even if we had a vaccine in the morning, I think you'll find that things will happen because of good and bad behaviours. Some people will thrive, some people will not. And that's going to be very hard to predict, and we'll only be able to look back at that, and then we won't be quite sure how bad was bad and how good was good. But I think that is a trend that's going to come through. People will remember, and they're talking about it. And
sorry for cutting across there. We've talked about the local thing a lot, and people rediscovering their local butchers and stuff. But the other thing is how an awful lot of these retailers, the local retailers, moved online. Now, I talked to a toy shop owner, a chain of toy shops in Munster, and he told me that they reckoned they were maybe 6 or 7 years ahead of where they thought they'd be, because they had no choice but to move fast. And do you think local, small and independent retailers in Ireland have really emerged stronger from this because they've been able to go online?
I think the ones who did. I saw Fibes and Scribes in Cork went online. They did craft classes. You can buy all their stuff online. I said they did really well because there's a big demand on things to do. And if you look at local boutiques and shops in the high street, in Dublin as well, in the suburbs, the ones who did click and collect did well. But then some were closed, and I would say they probably have gone backwards, unfortunately, and now hold stocks of clothes that are out of season. So I think the ones who grasped it early sort of became customer centric, did even click and collect or showcasing and really try to help people, because at that point they were helping people getting clothes, really did well. And as we said, will be remembered for it as well and will have that loyalty. But others who didn't, and again, weren't able to do it or didn't, will become laggards. And like in any marketing curve, you have the early adopters, the big middle rift, and then the laggards. The laggards may be those who don't make it, unfortunately.
What do you reckon, Colin?
Well, I think it's also interesting how many different things are converging. So we haven't mentioned the B word so far, the Brexit word.
Oh, I was hoping we'd get through the whole hour without talking about it. I know we can't.
The reason I mentioned it is because exactly as Kay is talking about in terms of the online development, people moving quite quickly towards it or not, and where local is. So people have only begun to realise in the last, I guess, fortnight at latest, that Amazon.co.uk will suddenly become an awful lot less attractive on the 1st of January, regardless of any deal. And people are now beginning to, if you go on to Google search, people are now searching, can you get co.uk DE for Germany or FR for France or IT. So people are now looking, can I get Amazon? But not necessarily. So if local, there isn't an issue of import taxes or delivery charges. Forget about being members of Amazon Prime, because that won't matter anymore when co.uk is gone.
Can I just say,
so
by the
local
way,
will become really important.
and I want to pat myself on the back here, because I've been writing about the Amazon.co.uk thing in the post-Brexit world for 4 years.
Absolutely.
And I've kept saying to people, listen guys, we're screwed.
Wake up
There's
here.
going to be no Amazon.co.uk.
Yeah.
And by the way, you can shop on Amazon.de.
You can.
Because they have a bilingual site.
Yeah.
You can also
Yeah.
shop on
France, so
Amazon.es and Amazon.fr.
Yeah.
And if you...
Or you can buy local.
Or you can buy local. And that
That's
one
the
of the
point.
things that we did in the Irish Times a couple of weeks back, just at the start of the second lockdown, we put together a list of Irish retailers
Oh, yeah.
where you could shop in the run-up to Christmas. And I started with 100. And then it was 200, and then it was 400. And I could have had 1,000.
Yeah.
And like, it really took me by surprise, the desire amongst people to shop local.
Yeah.
And I think, is that one of the explanations I have, and maybe you have a view on this, Lucinda, is that in the face of the pandemic, when there was nothing we could do, we could wash our hands and we could wear the mask, socially distance, but we couldn't fight this invisible virus. But what we could do to support our communities was to give our local shops, restaurants, cafes, money. We could shop with them. And I think, isn't that what we did? And that was an indication to me that consumer spending became an act of social solidarity rather than just the acquisition of stuff.
So that article that you're talking about, like, that was shared loads, because it came into me on WhatsApp and stuff like that, and people do really want to support local. And there's definitely an anti-Amazon camp as well. It's like, let's not support Amazon and support local. So I think, again, it's going back to our being social beings, wanting to support these companies. And like, even I think, you know, that Facebook group Shop in Ireland, there's all these small retailers putting up their business, a couple of lines on, a couple of pictures, and the support and the likes is massive. So I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And that is here to stay as well. And it's like, how do we enable those smaller retailers, one-man bands, to actually, again, get into bricks and mortar without having massive rents or anything, to get them not only their online channel, but actually get them in the mix so that people can go and visit them and they can trade even better.
Okay. I've got loads of questions that have come in, and I might just ask some of them so that it's not just me asking the questions. I suppose this is one that we've kind of touched on. It's from Gillian Mahan, and you all might have a view on this. In fact, you probably do. It's given that COVID-19 has hastened the changing consumer mindset across the generations, and there's been this push towards online shopping and the virtual experiential participation. How can young and smaller retailers compete with big brands and omni-channel presences? Can a small little brand in Ireland really compete against the giant players in the space?
Yes, I think they can.
Yeah?
I think it is about the experience. It is about the personal contact. It is about the after-sales service. It's not just about the sales. It's about building the relationship with that shopper, so that that person, he or she, will feel good about coming back, good about the purchase, and good about coming back, and also good about referring that experience on to other people. It's granular. It's the way we all would have read about in the past. It's coming back. The history is coming back to be present, which is it's not just a transactional arrangement. It's bigger and more than that. It's exactly as Kay said. It's an experience piece, and whether that is omni-channel or whether it's one channel, that's going to become more important.
And I would add to that as well, absolutely, that we need to have really clear, differentiated products. So there's no point selling the same product that the big guy has down the road that you can get anywhere. And I think, and we have seen lovely Irish products come through, again, featured in your column, and the Late did a feature on them, you know, local, you know. So it has to be something special that you'll pay a little bit more for, because I think you will need to charge a bit more. So what's that value proposition that you're offering that they can't get online or they can't get in the big place? And I do think people are supporting Irish for sure, as we said. However, I don't think that will continue automatically unless you do have better products and better services, because when people will have a lot of money, they will go down to the high street or go online, they'll buy luxury goods, and they want it made in Milan and look good and be a big brand. I do think people who are maybe a bit more cash strapped and people will want to support Ireland, but I don't think we can assume that that'll continue.
No.
I think you have to fight for that space really hard.
And do you think people will, like prior to 2020, people were driven almost exclusively by price. Whereas if you look at all the studies now, they're suggesting that people are driven more by a desire to support the local community. And I just wonder, Lucinda, there's a question here that you might have a view on, given your role in the pop-up business. Despite consumers, and this is from John Whelan, despite consumers shifting towards online channels, will physical retail outlets remain a critical part of tomorrow's shopping journey in terms of both brand engagement and purchase execution?
Yes.
They're very clever, these people, aren't they?
These are really good questions.
These aren't simple questions.
Yeah, think on the spot. Absolutely, it's part of the place, and we spoke about it because that physical space or place is about the experience. I think going back to the last question as well is we need to empower the smaller retailers or smaller brands, because it's fine for us bigger companies to sort of plan and execute and strategize, but they need their hands held a bit more on how they can do it. And cost is a big factor that inhibits them at the moment. So we need to look at a new retail model, I think, that will allow them to go into a physical bricks and mortar and potentially be on a turnover basis or something that's not blocking them from a fear that it's going to be too expensive and they're not going to make money from it, because the demand is there. I believe the demand is here to stay for Irish, and we will pay a little bit more premium for that. So, but I do think there are bodies, whether it's Popertee or others, that have to come up with new ways that we can allow them to have a physical presence to sell their product.
And maybe doing partnerships with some of the big guys. I've seen some of the small boutiques going into the bigger department stores as a co-partnership because they're offering something to that big retailer. So I think it's about thinking big about your own small business and what really you're offering that consumer, and where is that consumer shopping, and how can you get a slice of that wallet and heart.
And there's a conflict always, though, isn't there, between we like enduring businesses on our main streets. We like the fact that Weir's on Grafton Street has been there forever, or Arnott's on Henry Street, or I was going to say Moon's in Galway, but of course it's Brown Thomas. But we like those enduring shops, but we also like the fresh thing. How do you marry those two things, Lucinda? Because we like any time a shop closes, like Walton's, the music shop closed, and it was all this, oh, I miss Walton's, but you never shop there. Or Guineas, or Cleary's. We're sad when they go.
I was only talking to my dad last night. My dad had a store called FX Kelly on Grafton Street, which you might remember, and that was it reminds me a bit of the whole Selfridges and Mr. Selfridge, and why he did so well is he was the first adopter of creating an experience. And you go back to Weir's and that family, and they're creating an amazing traditional experience. So if we enable these local brands to go, what's your real brand values, and the stuff that Kate's really strong in, and let them have that place. And I think for me that magic mix on the Grafton Street or wherever it is those lovely traditional retailers combined with the bigger FMCG brands and who want to do their big experiences, and that's
I think I bought my first ever suit in FX Kelly. It was a suit shop.
Did you? Yeah. But and again, men's retail, I look at some of the international men's retailers doing well, and they're doing them through showrooms. It's not about setting up a new FX Kelly and we're going to roll out 300 stores. It's actually about looking at how we have a showroom. It's all going to be executed online, but the combination or the convergence of the online and offline.
But certain shops were doing very well pre-pandemic. So the likes of, I live out on the south side, out in Dalkey, Caveson's in Glasstool was thriving, Morton's is thriving, Nolan's, whatever Nolan's is now called out in Clontarf, thriving. And similarly, there are similar ones, Ivan's of Caherdavin in there, thriving. But that was before. Why? Because they offered a really good range, fantastic personal experience and a sense of community. And the community wasn't just I'm in the community, but they built a sense of community. So you felt different, you felt better. And I think when I first started working in the grocery trade as a supplier, there was a sense of theatre when you went into some of the bigger stores. So there's always sausages being cooked and coffees being sampled and breads being baked and try this and why about that, and special deal and big displays and promotions. And Christmas was an extraordinary amount of time where you could actually get fed for a day in there if you walked around, mince pies and Christmas cakes and try this soup, and that's all gone. And why is it gone? Because they just got into the price piece, exactly as you're talking about. And that idea of theatre, engaging, excitement is not unimportant when people are out there spending their hard-earned money.
And it could be coming back?
I think it is coming back.
Yeah.
And one for you, Kate, is this, it's from, it's just, there's no name on this, but it's somebody who was watching. Is sustainable, see what they did there? Or is it just another trend that consumers say they want but are not willing to pay for? Will we or can we realistically expect accurate carbon labelling of products? So the second part might be slightly more complex to answer, but do you think people are genuine when they say they're interested in sustainability and environmentalism, or is it just something they say and then they'll go off and buy their fast fashions that
I
are
might
brought in
have
from
told that
China?
about 5 years ago or 8 years ago, that it was just one of these notions people had, you know, and it's a value set of a very specific cohort. But I think it's no longer that, and I think it's a segment of society that's going. And if you look into, so I think it's going to be sustainable, because it is now, government is now owning it, so making Ireland green, making energy clean, and we have mandates around it, so it is happening all around us whether we like it or not. So I think it's filtered into the mainstream, so it's no longer like veganism, it's no longer a niche you know, dietary or an elective kind of trend. I think it is mainstream. I think it will last, because now the cohort, who, remember as well, Conor, that it's not Generation Xers, probably like me and some of us here. It's the Ys
all
and
of us
Zs.
but Lucinda, I
Yeah,
suspect.
maybe, It's the Ys and Zs, and now I drive an electric car, you know, because I choose to be sustainable, and I do where I can. And I think during COVID, we've all gone through our home products to be sustainable, because, you know, it's costing less. We have to for the environment, so it's become more mainstream. I think companies that are making it easier for us to do it will. I don't think we'll pay more for it.
That's the
A
point.
bit like organic, you know, people choose to be organic, but they don't want to pay for it. So I think it needs to be easy to do, not costing us more. And I think some people will be dragged, kicking and screaming through it for it to be done.
But I think also people need very clear communications on this.
Yes, make it easy.
So I think the fact that there is government mandates is very important. But it's not that long ago that we were all told diesel is very good.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we have to be quite clear as to exactly what we're actually going and what is the long-term path, because people invested in diesel cars will be quite furious if they're told they're off. Well, sorry, they are being told they're gone. They won't be allowed on in not that long a period of time. So clear and easily understood communications is going to be critical about it. But I think it is sustainable.
And a lot of trends are on
Go
the UK and here as well, and we've got access to them, that, you know, for refillers in the UK. So in 5 years' time, maybe not today, and you can do it today in Dublin, you can walk in and get your box refilled with products, flour included, and cereals. That's now going to become a thing in main supermarkets. So in your Lidl, that may become a thing in 2 years' time when it becomes mainstream. But it's a thing now, so it's going to grow. And also, cardboard boxing is a thing. It's very important. Plastic isn't all bad, but they're trying to make the plastic better. So it's happening all around us. So it pretty much is here to stay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And finally, one question that I'll put to all three of you, and I'll start with you, Lucinda. Are you optimistic that the world will be a better place once we've got through the pandemic? And do you think it'll have shaped us in a good way?
Yeah, I do go back to, I think we're all more aware of ourselves. And I think from not even just consumers, but us as humans, we're just more aware of what's good and what's bad, and what we want to do and what we don't want to do, and what we don't want to deal with those bad people and just deal with the nice people. And I think that's here to stay. And I think our values are stronger around that as well. So I think it's a good thing. And when we look at the future of retail and what it might look like, it's just opening up. To Colin's point, when you have a pandemic, it's opening up more opportunities. We are in a lot of trouble globally with retail, but no matter what, it will evolve, and there's something good going to happen.
Brilliant. Colin?
Well, one of the points that I know Leo Varadkar was very keen to push out, both as Taoiseach and as Taoiseach, has been that there's 11 billion in saving and we need to start spending it. So I think there may well be a kind of a wave of spending coming through, whether it be, you know, people travelling abroad or having parties. Obviously allowing...
What are they?
Assuming that we, not a political party, but assuming that we have a safe health environment. So there will be a splurge. But I think some of the things we've been talking about here will stay with us and resonate for many, many years to come. I think the real learnings will only come at the next generation when we look back. I think the people who should be watched very carefully are the people in the early 20s, late teens, early 20s, about how they're behaving, because they've had probably the hardest time. All of their normal life has been removed, be it travel or networking or parties or the big kind of set piece occasions that they would have been experiencing and used to and expecting. So understanding where they're going to go, I think, will be a key indicator of what society will be look like in the generation following.
Or even as the radio ad said, they didn't even get the shift.
That is even...
And what about yourself?
I suppose if you look back in 2007, as I did, I came back from London and people were spending fairly fast and furious. Did those people remember that coming up to 2010? No. So I'm a bit more maybe cynical. I think if you split it down the line to behaviours and values, people's behaviours are going to change because they've had to and will, and that might change back. People's values don't change overnight. They take forever. They take a long time, and we have very short memories. So I would like them to change, but I think the values probably won't change as much as we would like to hope to.
So that's 2-1 to an optimistic future then. Kay, you're the one. Brilliant. Well, listen, I think that's fantastic. And I think, guys, you've really enlightened me. And you've given me the ingredients for about 15 articles for the Irish Times in the weeks ahead. So I'm really, really glad about that. And I hope the people out there watching from their couches or wherever enjoyed the conversation. I know I did. Anyway, I'm going to hand you back over to Dermot Breen. And he's just got a couple of closing words. So thanks very much for watching. And thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks indeed, Conor, and thank you to the panel for an absolutely great discussion, real learnings. A few of the things that struck me out of it, just a few of the key messages, is that for business and enterprise, the key thing is, as ever, is to know your customer, understand their expectations, know what they want from you, to listen, respond and adapt. The other lesson that's coming through is about the need to reimagine, continue to reimagine our cities and urban spaces and our shopping environments. And a lot has been changed during the pandemic, but there's a lot more to gain there. And the other learnings from the pandemic are the sense of community that it has generated. We've reinvented or rediscovered our sense of community, and it's about shopping local and the great debate of all online or physical shopping. The big debate. I think we have a lot of lessons learned from this. I think, as Colin says, in time, we'll be able to look back in 2 to 3 years' time and see how real these changes were and how sustainable they were. But there's no doubt about it, there's changes, but a very valuable and very useful discussion. Thank you all very much. We are going to continue our Vision 2030 series into 2021. And our next seminar, a webinar, is going to be on Tuesday, the 26th of January, when Anne Herity is going to join us. Anne is the founder and chief executive of CPL Resources, and she'll be sharing her thoughts on the world, her business, and the future of business and the future of human resource management. And we greatly look forward to that, so please join us. In the meantime, please also join the RDS through the YouTube platform, where reruns of this webinar discussion can be seen over time. So please access that. So a final thank you to all our panel, and to wish you and everybody a happy Christmas and, of course, a very prosperous and changed 2021. Thank you very much.